Hello and welcome to my video. As you can see, we are here in exam schools where a lot of the lectures at the University of Oxford take place. A lecture is one of the things I'll be talking to in this general video about how to manage the move between A-level and undergraduate study. One of the things that is kind of new will be lectures, as well as handling reading lists independently and also writing an essay from that material. I want to try and help you feel as prepared as you can and help you to not worry. I also apologise in advance. I seem to forget to turn the light on in the library where I was filming, so it's a little bit dingy, but bear with me and I hope you enjoy. So section 1, understanding and approaching lectures is the first thing I want to talk to you about. They can be very different from subject to subject. I'm speaking as a philosophy and theology student, so at least I've got the kind of experience of two different disciplines to kind of generalise about lectures, but they're normally between like 1 and 2 hours. For us, we don't have them that often, but I know people who do physics and things have them all day long. It might be a particular topic that you have an 8-week series on and you have like one or two lectures a week. That's normally the way it goes as a kind of series, and it centres around a paper that you'll be taking, such as like a figure who's had a theory and there's been kind of academic debate about that theory. That's generally a topic that a lecture will be about, or like a period of time. I had a paper on John Stuart Mill's essays on liberty and utilitarianism. The whole paper and structure of the course was around that book, so the first lecture is kind of getting us used to the way you talk about the book, the kind of terms that you might use and that other scholars use when they're kind of referencing it in debates, and the kind of more complex debates and maybe responses to those objections come later on. What I tend to do is just make sure that I can gauge what the parameters of the discipline is, like what terms you use are always important to note down. I just used the kind of terms that the lecturer used, such as like criterion of correctness, because that was something in this, it was something different from rightness. That was kind of a big sticking point. So it's very, very important to kind of grasp what the lecturer is, what terms the lecturer is using and what they're pushing on, what distinctions they're less bothered by, so that you can be guided and be less bothered by those things as well. It's good to note those things down. However, I would say in general, when you're noting things down, only note them down if they're really, really necessary, because most lecturers will give you a handout, and actually some lecturers get really, really funny and annoyed if people are just clickety-clacking typing the whole time, because it distracts everybody and everybody then gets panicked and thinks, oh, I should be writing things down, and everyone stops actually engaging and starts just writing down word for word like a word processor. This is the Jesus College front quad, and I'm using this to introduce my next section on reading lists, which I'm set here at college. For my second section, I've quite aptly turned around the camera to show all the books behind me. So you've gone to the lecture and sort of your tutor, who's different from your lecturer normally, but they are on the same wavelength because they're employed by the same faculty at a university such as Oxford. Even if you're at a university where you don't strictly have a tutor, you'll still have to deal with reading lists for extended essays, coursework essays, that sort of thing. So this is still really relevant even if you're not particularly considering Oxford. Generally, you're not going to read all of those books, and you might get set a reading list that has, say, 15, 20 books, and sometimes your tutor might be nice and give you a book chapter, sometimes they won't. So sometimes they set an absolutely exhaustive list on the topic so that they can't be blamed if there's a slight detail that you're missing within the topic. But generally, a lot of the scholars, you might have 15 and there might be 3 of them that are arguing like a similar kind of argument, a similar kind of thing. So really, for your notes and for your own benefit, you only need to use the main one, or a modern update that's kind of interesting to you, that you're happy to talk about and that you kind of understand. As long as you take in the key players that the literature from, you know, you might read 2 or 3 things to start off with, and you're not reading the whole book. You might read the introduction and a couple of chapters that seem relevant to your essay title. Once you work out the mechanics of how the debate works, which, yeah, I normally work out after reading 2 or 3 things, I tend to kind of eliminate some of the reading that, you know, maybe I'll do at a future date, but I can't manage it all in a week. You know, I'm not a professional academic. I can't have read every essay, paper, article on a certain topic, and they know that. So yeah, just make sure that you've got a range of views represented. Cutting a corner is not a bad thing as long as you feel you've explored the topic in enough depth to write an essay about it. You're only human at the end of the day. You're not professional academic, so you might miss something, and that's totally okay. You're not going to get kicked out of university. You learn, and that's kind of scary, but also the beauty of it. And that leads me on to my final bit, which is,
what is the ideal structure for an undergraduate essay? Does anybody know?
I don't. I still don't know. When you get to university, you'll be the same as me. You'll go and ask your tutor or a lecturer, what's the ideal essay structure for, you know, a philosophy essay or, you know, a university essay, and nobody will ever tell you. Genuinely, no one will ever say. Even within these reading lists, you'll see everyone has their own style. You might think some styles are better than others, but ultimately, as long as it's clear and communicates the point, that the people marking your essay aren't that bothered. There are some basic things, like you should always have an introduction that tells people what you're going to argue and how you're going to argue and what you're going to argue. There's no this many sentences in an introduction, a paragraph should be this many lines. A word counts perhaps, but they're not really to constrain, they're just to suggest sort of how brief you should be, and that will inform how much content goes into the essay. So no one will ever tell you. It's a thing you might grasp from the reading a little bit, so you might see sort of in this field, in this discipline, this is maybe how an essay would read. You know, essentially at the bottom of it, and I still use it, point evidence explain is still relevant in every field. It's just how they put in the evidence, how they explain it, how they evaluate it. It's not as simple as it's convincing to me. You have to kind of give evidence for why it's convincing to you, why it's more convincing than another thing. So all of that's expanded, it's all slightly more complex, but at the heart of it, it is still point evidence explain. And the sophistication, I guess, of the point evidence explain structure is that you're expressing something that's quite complex within these quite simple and structures that you're quite used to. You don't need to just insert some pretentious quote at the start of your essay to get marks. What gets you marks is you evaluating something you've read and saying, so some scholar thinks this, I take his or their point, but actually this evidence that I'm going to bring in here, or this consideration that I'm going to bring in here, having done other reading, undercuts their argument in some way. And so that's the kind of, the explain bit is expanded, but the point is clear, the evidence you're using is clear, and you signpost that just as you would sort of GCSE A-level essay. The hardest bit is reading secondary literature, so scholars. There was an area of my English A-level and my history A-level called O5, where you just drop in a scholar's quote without evaluating it. That's something to leave behind in A-level because it's expected of you at university that you will be evaluating it. If you're using it in your argument, you've got to explain why you're using it in your argument, why they link to your argument. As long as you're using the same point evidence explain, but just with more sophisticated stuff to be point evidence explaining, that's fine. That is more than fine. And as I've suggested before, you know, you'll have some essays. I routinely have some essays that don't go so well, and that is completely fine. It's completely normal. Generally, if they're a good tutor, which hopefully they should be, they will be giving you corrections in your essay, kind of constructive things, because they want to make your argument look good, and they're suggesting ways to make your argument look as good as it can possibly look. Say you've done some great reading, you've done some great understanding, and you've just not quite expressed it in a way that's easy for them to read. They might point you in a way that helps you express it in a way that A, gets you access to higher marks perhaps, but also B, enables them to teach you and kind of engage with you in a better way. It's very difficult, and it's something that still takes getting used to, but you've got to be open to criticism if you're going to improve. And you know, they'd be bad tutors if they just stuck a mark on it and let you go away not knowing where you went wrong. And they'll tell you where you went right as well, because they'll engage with you, they'll ask you critical questions about it so that you can have an even stronger position about those certain points that have gone really well in your essay. So it's all about enhancing and developing the expression of your ideas and what you've got from the reading. So yeah, the main thing I hope to have communicated here is that learning, doing university, doing it right is an ongoing and active process, and there's not I can't make you a video that's saying how to approach lectures, how to read, how to write essays. That's something that sort of comes with time, experience and direction. And we're not professional academics, and we're among professional academics, so the last thing you want to be is complacent. You want to be actively engaging, learning, working out how you do things and how you can be helped to do things as well as you possibly can. It's just trial and error, which is, you know, the oldest method in the books. So use point, evidence, explain. You know how to read. Just read, and if it's harder to understand, read it twice. Work out for yourselves and for you as an individual how you're going to tackle a certain essay, how you're going to tackle a certain topic, what your take's going to be, and hopefully everybody around you is interested in what you have to say and wants to help you develop a strong critique or a strong argument for yourself. And you know, that is the transition from A-level to undergraduate, and you know, it's hard, but it's also the same thing you've been doing all along, really. Just know that you're going to be fine. Just keep doing what you are always doing, and be ready to learn, ready to be criticised, but also ready to criticise.